name is Lense Mullins, and welcome to Mindfulness Mondays, where you get a chance to talk with Beverly Kyer, and she shares with you so much important, relevant information when it comes to combating and thriving past compassion fatigue. And today we have a special presentation, and I'm going to bring on Beverly because she's going to be telling you more about compassion fatigue as it relates to the ACES AWARE training. Good morning, Beverly. How are you?
Good morning, Lense. Good morning, everyone. I am excited to tell you about ACES Aware. Most of you may even know about it already, but I want to tell you how it came into my presence and how it is so completely connected to the work that I do and why I'm so passionate about it. I want to make sure that everybody knows about it. So I wanted to use this broadcast time to share it and get the word out even more than it already is. But for me, it begins like this. I began my country, as most of you know, my company in 2004. And initially, my work, a large component of my work was about the impact of childhood trauma on the brain development in children, the behavior, the learning in children. And I always noted and shared in the learnings, the teachings, that we tend as service providers for children to struggle with challenging behaviors without understanding what undergirds them, what motivates them, what drives it. We were also looking at the health challenges, risks on children. And I was not even close to understanding the full implications of the health risks, particularly of those unbuffered abuses and neglects and the dysfunctional households that those children come out of. Really what that meant, the scope and the depth of it, the amount of injury. And I certainly did not know back then that we could actually screen for the health risks and intervene early, which is so critical. Had also been my primary mission, and even more so over that same 17-year period, to train and support human service providers, the actual helpers, the stakeholders, in understanding and mitigating the effects of their own secondary and vicarious trauma, their own post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome, as I prefer to call it, their own burnout. Combine all of that stuff is known as compassion fatigue, and you'll know that is the very underpinnings of the work that I do. My training pointed me to the impacts for all of the workers, all of the providers, all of the caregivers, including the physical impacts. We were looking at the cognition, the emotional things, the behavioral issues, the interpersonal issues, the spiritual issues, but we were also looking at the physical impacts. Again, but in a very limited way, because I did not know about ACEs at that point. When working with providers, the caregivers, the helpers, social workers, and medical workers, and mental health workers, the behavioralists, the counselors, the probation, all of those folks who I call under the category of human service providers, the rescuers. We help them see that their work is battling the risk factors created by adverse childhood experiences. That's what ACEs is, adverse childhood experiences. But also that the providers working with these children and the adults who have been exposed to those events early in life need to be aware of how to protect themselves concurrently, so that they can continue to do their amazing and very, very important work. And then I was blessed to become an ACES grantee. And I call it an absolute blessing because it really opened up a world for me while actually thoroughly reviewing the material, the content, figuring out how to integrate it with my compassion fatigue work. When I was looking at the materials and the extraordinary data and evidence around ACEs, the interconnectivity between ACEs and compassion fatigue, this really exploded for me and my team. ACEs is a marriage to compassion fatigue. It is part of the DNA. It is absolutely inseparable. Is inseparable. So it's all inclusive now in what I do. And so, typical to me, when I learn of something new, I want to share it. I made it my business to share it with you. I wanted to get the word out to all of you, those who know, those who have some idea about it, some who are completely new to it. And I decided that there was no better person to present ACEs in a very concise yet very, very detailed way than Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, our California Surgeon General, speaking to you from the office of the Surgeon General. I got permission to use a video of her making this particular presentation, and we would like to present that to you now. Pay attention.
Let's start with some numbers. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, affect 2 out of every 3 Californians. Without intervention, they can lead to toxic stress, creating long-term physical, mental, and behavioral risks for your patients. 9 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the U.S. are associated with ACEs. And for communities that face higher levels of adversity, toxic stress can further perpetuate health inequities. That's why the Office of the California Surgeon General and the California Department of Healthcare Services have developed ACES Aware, a program that gives providers like you the power and support to screen for and respond to ACEs and toxic stress, improving your patients' health now and in the future. The number one thing that you can do to help your patients is early detection and evidence-based treatment. It all starts by becoming ACEs Aware. Sign up for the 2-hour online training and learn how to screen for adverse childhood experiences and how to recognize and respond to the symptoms of toxic stress with interventions supported by science. By screening for ACEs and applying the principles of trauma-informed care in your practice, you can help California cut ACEs and toxic stress in half in a generation. Join us to make a difference. Go to acesaware.org to get trained today.
ACEs Aware is something that all of us who work in human services should be engaged in. It's initially called an initiative. It has become, for many of us, certainly for myself, a movement. It gives all of the healthcare providers, all of the human service providers and caregivers teams the power to support and screen for and respond to the lingering effects of toxic stress in children and adults.
Beverly, I wanted to ask you what the impetus was behind your organization's interest in ACEs Aware. You kind of went a little bit about that, but what in particular made you decide that this was something that you wanted to affiliate your organization with?
As I said, my work has always been about understanding the impact of trauma and toxic stress on childhood brain development, behavior, and learning. That was always my work. It evolved to be very inclusive of working at the human service provider, the helpers, to understand the impact of the secondary vicarious exposure. You know, we send them every day into their work exposed to secondary vicarious trauma, burnout, and post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's, and the illnesses that can the result of the cumulative effect of trauma, particularly on buffered trauma, is significant. 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death are stress related. 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death is a host of illnesses, a host of behavioral manifestations related to stress. Now, we say with the children, they need the buffering, somebody to protect them, to save them, to change the internal working model about what is happening in their lives for their healing process. For the adult, most of us, many of us, sometimes for cultural reasons or gender reasons, we don't even ask for help. We somehow feel like we need to plow through, be able to serve and deliver without asking for help. So there's nothing to buffer what's going on for us, and therefore the impacts are significant. It's significant, and it can become and do become for many people life-threatening. But in the meantime, there are degrees of debilitation because of the toxic stress syndrome in our bodies. So that's what made it connected. I just had no idea of the scope and the depth of it. I knew nothing about the data. I knew nothing about the degrees of evidence of the landmark studies with the Center for Disease Control, Kaiser Permanente. I heard a little bit of Dr. Nadine Burst, but to really sit down and get the full scope of it, while I was trying to integrate how to blend that work with the material that I already had existing, it just blew me up when I saw the integration. It was a marriage. It was inseparable. It became DNA. So I cannot do my work without being inclusive of ACEs. I
There was
cannot
kind
do
of
it without being inclusive of compassion fatigue and all of its manifestations. This is the impetus behind it. This belongs together.
And there's definitely a seamlessness to it in terms of what the
Yes.
program offers and what you offer, and the same kinds of core objectives and principles that you have in your company. They also exhibit in ACES as well. What kinds of things do you want your partners to take away as a result of participating in a project with ACES when they engage in the work with ACES? What is it that you want them to learn? What key learnings do you want them to go away with?
The most basic thing is that once they look at this, becomes clear the need to know this, the need to get the work out, the benefit to really be able to make an impact in the health outcomes of children and adults alike. That's what they walk away from. And really critical to me is that everybody takes a role. People like to think that the screening is the beholding of the service providers, the medical service providers. Yes, absolutely imperative. Yet, if you're not the person to do the screening, you still get to be the person to spread the word, to encourage. I work with CASA workers, and some of them may become screeners, but many of them, they ride along and they talk to those children. They fight for them in court. So they may not ever do the screening, but they're the ones who have access to talk to the children, talk to the birth parents, the kinship parents, the foster parents, to encourage them to go through the screening process to get ahead of and impact these illnesses. Everybody gets to play a role, some role, in getting the word out, helping other people to become aware of ACEs.
And that's the beauty of what the Surgeon General is talking about in the video, is how this program is integrated to help many people in the many different roles. And it's kind of a glove fit. And there's so many, for lack of a better description, tentacles leading into the community from this kind of a program that helps deal with the very myriad faces of compassion. It's a plethora of networks that are out there that can benefit. I never realized how many people are prone to suffer from compassion fatigue. But the other thing is, that's really interesting, that people who are in the helping professions, in the services, the first responders, the doctors, the nurses, the human service providers, the policemen, all of those people don't realize that these services are out there and available to them, but more specifically, don't even realize that they might be suffering from compassion.
Yeah, I've literally been in training sessions, and I'm talking to a group of probation officers, talking to some law enforcement, talking to some attorneys that fight at the border, fight for child advocacy from human trafficking. And somebody says, "Thank you for saying that, because now I know what's wrong with I'm going through." I thought it was me. I thought it was my failure to be able to do this work. And I've had grown men just like break out and cry because they thought they were losing it. But to understand the effects, and that you can do something to mitigate the effects, that's power.
And that's why I'm running this, not just in your group, but also on my profile and in my pages, because I know I have women who are following me who are nurses, definitely have doctors following me, practitioners, and also those who work administratively in the hospital system, and those who have other roles that have been impacted by the pandemic, that are now serving people who have been directly impacted. Your day-to-day interaction with those people who have been traumatized as a result of the pandemic and other kinds of trauma, that impacts you. Maybe it's not primary. Yeah,
You
that's
absorb
not
it.
may not be primary, but it could be secondary. And it's amazing the symptoms that you have that you might be writing off as something else that could be directly correlated to compassion fatigue. And that's why I'm running it in the other groups. And sorry for the technical difficulties. We're going to re-edit it so you can get it. But I think you understand what I'm saying. If you are suffering from some of these issues that we've talked about all throughout these series on Mindfulness Mondays with Beverly, you need to take a look at that and maybe reevaluate, because if you're a first responder or any of those professions that I just happen to have mentioned, there's a good possibility that you could benefit from affiliating with Beverly and with the ACES training that she provides. And that's the reason why we're doing this. That's the reason why we come in front of you every Monday, because we really do care about your overall well-being. And I think we all have experienced what it's like to live in an environment where people aren't really dealing with the truth of the situation, where it's been covered up, glossed over, put in our emotional closets or whatever, and then it just all comes tumbling out. And then there you are left with no tools to cope. We don't want that for our personal lives. We can't necessarily deal with what's going on with our country right now, with all the things that have happened as a result of maybe some mistruths or misunderstandings about what's really happening. But you can deal with that in your own life. You don't want to be in denial. Knowledge is power. And here Beverly is with the connections to provide you with these services that are so desperately needed for all of you who are in service professions.
Mm-hmm. And the caregivers. Don't forget.
Oh, yeah. Here's another thing. All of the midlife women who are following me in the various media, many of you are in some kind of caregiving situation. Mm-hmm. It could be with your parents. It could be with your husbands. It could even be with your grandchildren. It could be with friends or family who have been struck with the virus and are now recovering at home, or they've been released from the hospital and they're still exhibiting signs or the aftermaths of that process of getting well. That's traumatic. One minute they were well, fine, mom, dad's doing great, they're aging gracefully, they've taken all their shots and everything else. And then 6 months later, you're taking care of someone who has been on a vent for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. That's traumatic. Mm-hmm. Or you are taking care of your parents, who just all of a sudden started to age. Maybe it was one parent and then the next parent. So now you got 2 parents. Your life has had to change. You're still working. You might be helping out with the grandchildren, and now your parents
have a lesser capacity to manage things independently, and it's all on you.
Right.
It's for you.
That is traumatic.
Yes.
There's no way you can anticipate what that's like until you've actually experienced it. Yes. And what you want to do is to use the tools, get the training and the support to fortify you so that you don't become a part of the statistic of people who help and serve, who are stressed out and exhibiting other signs of chronic disease later on as a result of not taking care of themselves. That's why we do these things. That's why we keep coming to you talking about compassion fatigue, because it's more than just the firemen and the policemen.
That's true.
It's a large majority of
every helper. I think that's why I use the term help for those who help others. It's every helper.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's a much larger percentage than we realize. It really is. And as I like to always say, knowledge is power. So for those of you who don't belong to the Wellness Reset group, you should go and join it right now and take a look at these wonderful videos that gives you so much information, as well as the postings on the wall. There's all kinds of information about compassion fatigue, because that way you can make an informed decision on what your next steps are going to be. And one of those steps should be contacting Beverly to find out where you can get support to be able to deal with the symptoms that come with compassion fatigue. Beverly, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties, but that's okay.
Everything. I know you'll edit it and make it work fine. Those things happen.
Yeah, we'll get it together, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew, what this is all about and why we're doing what we're doing and why we feel that it's so important and why it's such a passion for Beverly, who's given more than 30 years of her life to this very topic. Beverly, thank you. For your service.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being a part of us and stay with us. And, my thing is stay safe and stay well and stay vigilant. And God bless. See you
God
next
bless.
week.
Bye-bye.